Well, staying with this story, let's get more now with the former US National Security Advisor and former US Ambassador to the UN, John Bolton. John, always good to see you on the show. Thank you. And I want to start by asking your reaction when you first heard the news about the killing of Sinwar yesterday and the way in which it was done and discovered. What were your thoughts?
Well, I thought it was a good day for the world. This is a vicious, barbaric terrorist who has finally met his fate. Better late than never. And I think it points to the very significant damage that Israel has done to this particular proxy for Iran in the Gaza Strip. I think there's more work to be done. I don't think there's any reason for a ceasefire. I think Israel should continue to try and achieve the objective it set out immediately after October 7, which is to eliminate Hamas as a military and political force.
You think that Netanyahu should proceed with that strategy, not get around a negotiation table and talk about ceasefire yet?
Negotiate with whom and for what? You want to end the conflict in Gaza? Why don't people ask Hamas to surrender?
Do you think that's a possibility? I mean, so the alternative is continue militarily flattening and trying to weed out every Hamas terrorist in Gaza?
Yeah, it's how you win World War II. You demand, as the United States did, unconditional surrender from Japan and Germany, and you fight until they agree to it.
And that's obviously a very big departure from what current US President in his final days of his presidency, Biden, is saying today, asking for that ceasefire, asking for Netanyahu's cabinet to work towards that. So do you think the US government's on the wrong track?
And it has been for over a year. They have not acknowledged the real strategic reality in the Middle East, which is this is not a Hamas war against Israel. It's not a Palestinian war against Israel. It's an Iranian war against Israel, of which Gaza forms one front. And that's why, really, I think the decision Israel is now confronting as to how to respond to the second ballistic missile attack against its territory from the territory of Iran on October the 1st, what they're going to do about it. Just to put this in context, the October 1 attack by Iran was the largest ballistic missile attack in human history.
In Berlin today, I believe it is, Joe Biden, speaking to reporters, a reporter asked him, do you know how Israel is going to retaliate and when? And he said yes and yes. And she said, will you tell me? And he said no and no. Do you think it's true that Biden does know how and when Israel's going to retaliate?
I'd be surprised, actually. I don't buy the argument that they have necessarily agreed not to attack the nuclear and oil facilities. I think the nuclear program is a military program. And indeed, it's the most dangerous program, not just for Israel, but for the United States. And as a matter of counter-proliferation policy, really dangerous for the world as a whole.
In terms of the possibility of ceasefire elsewhere in Lebanon, Biden quite confident that that's something that might be achievable, but acknowledging it will be harder in Gaza. So do you think he does understand that it is going to be difficult to negotiate with Hamas?
I think he's dreaming. I don't think you can negotiate with terrorists in good faith. That's not the way they are. And I think it's the systematic destruction of the terrorist threat that's necessary.
Will it require negotiation with Hezbollah in order to ensure a ceasefire in Lebanon?
Well, after their stockpile of missiles is destroyed, the CIA in its public fact book, obviously published long before this conflict broke out, estimated, this is what they say publicly, estimated that Hezbollah had up to 150,000 missiles. So I think if I were facing that terrorist threat, I wouldn't be satisfied until the threat had been eliminated.
I find it interesting speaking to terrorist experts in interviews over the past few weeks, talking about whether it's possible to do what was done with the Islamic State with ISIS in terms of weeding them out root and branch and almost getting rid of the organization for good. Do you really think that's possible with Hamas?
Sure. Why shouldn't it be possible? You know, if you look at what happened in Germany after World War II with an aggressive denazification program, having eliminated really the Nazi infrastructure, Germany's now gone almost 80 years without a resurgence of Hitlerite Nazism. So I think if you have the will and the resolve, and I think most importantly, if the Gazan residents see a world without Hamas's intimidation, and I think it's coming into view. Then you can have the prospect of Hamas truly being eliminated. And I think people telling you how hard it is haven't lived under what the Israelis lived under on October 7th.
It obviously presents a very difficult challenge, post, say, elimination of current-day Hamas, not to have generations of radicalized young people who saw their families bombed and killed for years in Gaza and elsewhere in the region. Do you think it really is possible to get away from that? I'm talking, you know, when you're sat in the Middle East and speaking to people who may have experience or family in Palestine or Gaza or Lebanon or anywhere else at the moment, the feelings are very strong about the way that Israel has conducted this. Do you think it's really possible for people to see outside of that?
Sure, I think they have to ask themselves why they allowed Hamas to use their families and friends as human shields. The war crimes that have been committed in Gaza are entirely Hamas's responsibility. You know, the West has spent a couple hundred years trying to separate innocent civilians from combat. Hamas's whole strategy is to put innocent civilians at the center of the conflict as human shields. That's the barbarity. And people in Gaza should ask themselves, is that the kind of regime they want to see imposed on them again?
Is it going to require more US support for Netanyahu to carry through his military aims in Gaza if he's going to continue the war in the way that he says he is, the way that you would advise him or support him in doing? Is it going to require yet more US military assistance, of course, the sending of sort of anti-missile defense systems and things like that, but also US troops?
I don't think it'll require U.S. troops, although we do have troops on the ground that the Biden administration has put there to help man the anti-missile defenses that we've given. But look, this is what Israel's doing is defending the world against terrorism. They are systematically dismantling two pillars of the terrorist proxy network that Iran has set up over a period of decades. I think the U.S. could do more to help Israel. I think we could do more to dismantle the Houthi terrorist network. And I'm very pleased that in the past day or two, the Biden administration has sent B-2 bombers with what are called massive ordnance penetrators, that is to say, bunker busters, to break up the arsenal that Iran has provided to the Houthis. You know, it's been a principle of American foreign policy since we were a country to advocate freedom of the seas. And what the Houthis have done, except for their favorites like tankers carrying Russian oil, is they have closed one of the world's most vital sea lanes, the Suez Canal, Red Sea Passage. And I think we ought to open it. And I think doing that means cutting off the Houthis' supply of rockets and drones from Iran and eliminating whatever capacity remains in Yemen for use against international shipping.
And the first time those B-2 bombers were used since 2017, showing the significance clearly of what was thought imperative. Former US National Security Advisor and former US Ambassador to the UN, John Bolton, thank you.
Thank you.